It's been a while, everyone. It has been some time since we've had news this big, this enormous in the world of Phobies. It's not just the second anniversary of our beloved game, which is big enough news on its own. We're, of course, anticipating a whole bunch of new Phobies. I'm hoping some new maps and maybe even some new mechanics. We saw new tiles show up in the last few updates. What we're talking about this time is the upcoming balance update. We know it's coming right around the corner. Why? Because we got an announcement as to what those balance changes are. And not only is there a huge amount of changes, they are far-reaching. And there's a whole lot to talk about, so let's get to it. So here we are. We are looking at the official patch notes, which at the time of this recording on the live stream over on Twitch, by the way, link for that in the description down there by the like and subscribe button. Getting those in the beginning. This time I remember. It was maybe 40 minutes ago that this went up, somewhere around that. Maybe 50? I'm not sure. But these are the official patch notes. We're going to go line by line, talk about them, give you my fresh, hot takes on what this patch is going to bring. Now, before we actually get into it, I, of course, have to let everybody know I am part of the content affiliate program. The Phobies team does give me coffee for producing Phobies content, just like this. But, as I always tell everybody and remind everyone, it is my own thoughts. Not all of them are going to be positive. Spoiler alert. All right, let's get to it. So, Nigorite posted this earlier this evening, the 1.9 Phobies balancing release notes. Trying to make sure it stays on screen so you can see what I'm reading. Hi, Phobie Wranglers. We wanted to tell you what balance updates we've done for the next release and comment on some units that are balanced but have perceptions that are not matching their stats and win rate KPIs, key performance indicators. We very much appreciate all the feedback and suggestions you've given, and we hope the changes listed below are received well by the community. Now, before we actually get into everything, let's break down this set of statements. So when I first read this, I was a little unclear, and I still kind of am, on exactly whether this statement is A, everything, including the things that got changed, are balanced, meaning that they are roughly around their 50% win rate, we'll say, whatever the team feels is appropriate for the phobie. That's statement A, that everything, whether it's Akira or it's Alligator, they are balanced. Or is the statement here that the ones that got changed, the team felt were out of whack with their win rate and KPIs. And the ones who didn't get changed, they're mentioning them strictly because the community brought them up, and therefore they wanted to call attention to it to say, hey, we did look into it, but we decided not to do anything at this time. I am assuming the latter, but when I initially read it, I took it as the former. It's the latter. Okay. So, getting confirmation in the live chat here. So, the indication here is the latter, which means that the ones that were changed are out of whack with what the team was expecting, whereas the second set, and we'll get there much later on, because trust me, there's a lot to go through. I threw out these numbers before we started doing this particular part of the recording, but overall, there were 40 phobies mentioned. Or 40 phobies, excuse me, that were mentioned that were not changed. 30 phobies were changed for a total of 70. There are 170 phobies total in the game. That's like 41%. I'm rounding a little bit here. That's like 41% of the phobie pool that was getting looked at. Now, for the 30 that got changed, that's still 17%, again, rounding, of the pool. And that's almost 1 in every 5 phobies. That's an enormous amount. That is earth-shattering amount, or an earth-shattering amount. It's an extreme amount of changes. And I mentioned this, again, before the recording. There are very few games that I've played, and I'm struggling to even call one to mind, that made this level of change. Actually, I think Mythgard did. But digression aside, that made this level of change, this huge amount of changes outside of an alpha beta phase where, you'd kind of expect that there would be changes going on and rebalancing going on and things like that constantly. And that's not a, this is awesome. That's not a, this is terrible. That's a, okay, this is really cool. This is interesting. And it's important to keep in mind the level that this is going to change. I was trying to explain this a bit earlier, but imagine Phobie A, and we'll probably come back to this, but imagine Phobie A causes Phobie B to essentially be unplayable. Phobie A is used all the time, whether it's on small maps, it's on big maps, it's on whatever. And Phobie B gets the ever-loving crap kicked out of it by Phobie A. Well, now, whether Phobie A was directly buffed or nerfed, it is going to be impacted by the other changes, and therefore both Phobie A and Phobie B, neither of which may be on this list, are now going to be indirectly buffed or nerfed due to the relationships they have with other phobies in the game. That could be breakpoints, that could be tempo advantages or disadvantages, it could be map-centric strategies, it could be a variety of different things. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as we go through the patch notes and talk about each thing, because realistically, yeah, sure, great, Akira got changed, hooray, we all wanted that. But how does that actually impact the game? Are we better off? Are we worse off? Or realistically, what everybody should be saying to themselves right now is you don't know. No one knows. No, except maybe the devs. Like the devs have been testing this for a while. But no one else has a clue. We're all just, again, it's hot takes. The hottest takes. So, let's get into the actual changes, chat. And again, live stream, if you have any other comments, let me know. So first up, Akira. We are, of course, in alphabetical order, but I think the biggest thing is, like, this was the first one I was looking for. So I'm glad it was right at the top. It's funny how that works. Akira, increased ability lock from 1 turn to 2 turns. This allows the opponent to have more time to prepare for the power of the ability. Yes, correct. I like where this is going. It also, literally first change we're seeing, we're already deviating from the previous balance patches that were now almost 2 years ago. Those were strictly numbers based. It was HP or it was damage. Now we're seeing other things change, including the ability locks, which is awesome. That is really cool that is in the dev's toolbox. Not that it never was, but it's important to know that they are willing to change those things, as opposed to saying, like, this is the gospel and it's only those other adjustments we're going to make. And there's a lot of room for changing those numbers, as we'll see, to get in the other changes. But there's some things that do require it. Akira, obviously Cupcake, spoiler alert, we'll get to that one. But Akira, is this the change we needed or the change we deserve, or both? There were a lot of suggestions about reworking the entire ability, and based on some of the comments both in chat and also in these notes, it sounds like that level of change probably would have to come in a later patch if it was necessary. When we're talking about completely changing the ability, it sounds as though if there's a number on the Phobie card, the health, the damage, the locks, the cooldowns, the movement, like any of the numbers on there seem like they are, okay, they can make those changes. But it seems as though if it was a larger, okay, we're completely redoing this thing, the text is different, that where it's the letters, we'll say, as opposed to the numbers, that's something that's going to require a longer, more involved change. I don't know if that's true, making some assumptions here, but that's what it seems to be. Personally, I think Akira, I am looking forward to trying this. However, I don't know how much it matters. It certainly feels appropriate. It never made sense to me that Heartbreaker had a 2-turn warm-up, the lock, but Akira had a 1-turn warm-up. Like that's just bonkers. Made no sense to me. So I absolutely love where this is going. I don't know that it's enough, but it is absolutely going to change things and is going to have far-reaching consequences. I can't really knock this one too much. One thing that I will say here, that for some reason they, on all the numerical changes, as you'll notice, this allows the opponent to have more time to prepare for the ability. But Bad Side Manners, for example, as we look at the next one, gets a damage buff. Great. Bad Side is something that people like. I think the Phobie's hilarious. I think it would be cool to see it more often. It's definitely, like, art-wise, a lot of flavor, but it clearly was lacking. What I would want to know, and this is one of my complaints for the notes as a whole, I want more information from the devs as to why. Like, okay, we know that Bad Side Manners clearly was not meeting the standard they had in mind. And like, we can infer some things because it's a damage buff, so it clearly wasn't doing enough damage. Is it now going to hit a breakpoint that we didn't have before? I'm not really sure. I do like Bad Side more now with his damage buff, but I do not like how it's kind of an oddish number. Some of the numbers do get away and they become weird, but the only where it really matters is because it's a 3% stat gain per level, so it can get a little weird. Like, it's not a clean number like a 10 or a 5 or something like that. Like 40 is fine. Like, you can do that pretty quickly, but at level 1, I don't know offhand. Again, hot takes, like, I don't know what this is killing now that it didn't before, but I think this may have been more this in conjunction with X equals dead Y. That's what I'd expect, and I do like that. 900 health units, which is still kind of common, will still survive it. I mean, 880. Yes. Unless I don't understand where you're going with that. You're thinking of something else? Sure. Okay. So Bad Side, I like this change. I think Bad Side's cool. Blondie also getting a attack damage buff 50, which is, both of these, by the way, are significant. Like, this is pretty significant. I'd anticipate that there is a break point for both of these. I just don't know what it is offhand. And for anybody who's not sure what I'm talking about when I say that, when I say break point, I mean Snowball, Murderwing, Jar. They are all in this relationship. Well, the two are in a relationship with Jar where they use their ability and on level, they kill the Jar. They have hit that break point, but they may not one-shot something else. However, Blondie and Bad Side now may be able to hit a break point for taking something down that they wouldn't have before. Because remember, if your Phobie is at full health or 1 health, it doesn't matter because it lived and now it gets to do its thing. However, if you exceed whatever the break point is, their Phobie's dead and doesn't get to act. So hopefully it hits something there. I don't think that'll fix Blondie, though. It'll make it more enticing. Bad Side, the damage buff definitely makes sense because it's a turret Phobie. So you want it to sit there. It's going to absorb some attacks, and it's supposed to be a deterrent because your opponent likely can't kill it in one volley of their team, let alone one Phobie, and then it gets to retaliate, right? Your typical stabby Bowmangles play. Blondie, on the other hand, is a melee Phobie that needs to inch its way up. So it's possible that now, just like the single hit is now more salient. Like 50 is a lot of extra damage. Is it going to solve Blondie's problem? To DT's point, I don't know. I'm not sure. But I can't turn away Blondie buffs. We'll have to see. Bluelian. So we're back to nerfs. Increase the ability cooldown from 1 to 2 turns to help reduce the number of pulls it can have simultaneously. I think pretty much everybody felt this. Bluelian, I've had tons of games where it's like, yep, I'm going to fill the whole map. You just spam healing spas, and even though their healing isn't, you're not healing a ton, they stay out there forever. And there's no cost. Like there's like no penalty at all. Now at least there's a time investment, so it isn't oh, you have Russell? I'll just put down Boolean and completely invalidate everything you do because it just doesn't matter. Boolean also sort of invalidated a lot of other healing phobies, so I think this makes sense. Like, this is a positive change. I don't think there's anybody, including Boolean users, who looked at Boolean and said, yeah, it definitely needs the cooldown it has. So I think this is good. So after that, Boggart. Increase the move range from 1 to 2, which should allow for better targeting of opponents. So we're now getting into, because there are several of these. We're now getting into what I think are extremely dangerous changes. These are extremely dangerous changes. And like I said, this isn't the only one. Has the movement ever been buffed before? Movement has never been impacted at all, to my knowledge, before. That's a really big deal considering no stat changes. Yeah, exactly. So here's the thing. The way Phobies works now, like unwritten rules we're talking about, range is better than melee. And obviously, higher movement is better than lower movement. To the point where single movement Phobies are supremely problematic in a lot of cases. As in, like, they are problematic in the sense that they're almost unplayable across the board. Yes, you get turrets, but the reason you can get turrets is because, and specifically, you see stabby and bow mangles, previously not things like bad side manners, is because they were one movement, and you had to waste time banking for bad side and then inching it up. As opposed to stabby, or bow mangles, who could be put on the board early on for minimal investment. I mean, on a small map, admittedly, it's your entire turn, but we're not banking multiple turns. And then you could start walking it up immediately, and it's in play before the game advances so far that, okay, your opponent has now built up forces to threaten said turret. Upping the movement on these Phobies, especially for something like Boggart, where it's just going to run up and then bomb your team. So for those who aren't familiar, if I remember, I will put this up. Let me try and find Boggart real quick. See if I can get the card on screen when I'm editing this. I'm going to have to go to the Phobie Finder. I don't see it in my thing in Discord. All right, so like I said, hopefully I remember to put this up when I'm editing, but for those unfamiliar, Boggart is a 7 key, was previously 1 movement, now 2 range, 1800 health with God of Light. 2 range on that, it sticks to an enemy and adds an AoE explosion for 1,000 damage. It's kind of a big deal. So it can run around and chase your team down and then put the explosive on your guy. Whereas before, obviously, it wasn't getting played because of the 1 movement. Now, this thing, I'll be honest, I don't think I can't recall a single game where I've seen Boggart. It might be, I don't know if it's out there and everybody has in their collection just collectively went, this guy sucks. But we might see this thing everywhere now. Because it's almost a cheaper boss now. It has less health. It's obviously a different phobie type. But it was kind of it's a 7-cost boss. Because for the same things you have to do, like hiding your phobies, spreading them out, I don't know, I'm a little worried about this one. This one kind of scares me. I have faith in the devs, but this one concerns me. This one, he does kind of have the stats of a 6 key, but the ability, though, yeah, it does have, if I recall, I'd have to go back and look, but I'm not I don't care. I think it has the same health as Klepto / Crushmore at base. But that ability is so impactful. And odds are your opponent is not going to be able to kill the Boggart with a single Phobie. So what they're going to have to do is you dive them with the Boggart. You put the explosive on them. They hit it once, assuming it's a range Phobie. Like, they hit it once with that guy and then run it away. Or run it into your team, just to get it away from theirs. I don't think there's friendly fire on it. And then they collapse with the rest of their team in order to kill the Boggart. So this might be fine, but 1,000 damage is like an enormous amount of damage. So is it worth using a 7 key to snipe something? Maybe? I could see this thing being a terror on small maps just because there isn't enough surface area, and it's just greatly increasing the need for Crushmores and Gravediggers in order to free up more parts of the map. So people wanted changes in the meta. They wanted other Phobies to show up. I think this guy's going to show up. Like, at the very least, we're going to see a lot of Boggart for a couple weeks or a few weeks after the balance pass for people to try it out. And then we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But like this, the changing of movement scares me. The changing of movement scares me. So we'll have to see how this one works out. Here's another one that everybody was clamoring for. We got Boss finally getting nerfed. No king reigns forever, my son. No king reigns forever. Decrease the health from 2120 to 2000 and decrease the ability basic damage, presumably, from 300 to 275. So I saw people already grumbling, we'll say, about this particular nerf, that it wasn't with the specific things that they wanted. I think this is possibly over nerfing it. I'm not sure yet. This is one that I have to mull over. So I really think that Boss could have done with just strictly an HP nerf. I don't know if 120 HP, like if they just did this, I don't know if that would be enough. Because the issue is, it's just, you can't dive the Boss preemptively. And if it gets off of your fire, okay, now you kill it and you're still getting super penalized. Like there's no actual advantageous way to fight this thing. You feel like it should have had 1800 HP for Boss? Nah, I don't think that's true. I don't even know the 19, like 2000 probably is enough. So I'm a little confused here. Would have had the health of Hevo or Hematic. Yeah, that sounds like it's, I don't know. I might be okay with it being a glass cannon if that was its intended role. But so this second part, I'm assuming here this is on you're fired. So let's pull it up while we're talking about it. Yeah, so the Boss's basic attack is 400 with 100 fire damage. And then your fired is 300, of course, in its AoE, and 200 fire damage a turn. So the 300 is going to 275. So 275, that's 475. If we go with Gonzo, and Gonzo gets changed later, but the old Gonzo would have been 5 and 775. So I kind of agree with 1920 just to keep it weird. I mean, to be honest, DT, like I always thought that the health value was weird. I don't know. This screamed spreadsheet to me, that when Boss was designed, they looked at a spreadsheet and said, okay, for 8 keys and these sort of things, this is what its health should be. That's what it felt like to me. I don't know if that's actually true. I'm sure it played in, but so here's the reason why I think this went overboard. For the last 12 weeks, almost, 12 weeks, we've been running Monster of the Week. Monster of the Week has phobie bans. It won't after this update because we want to try out the new stuff and we want to see, okay, does anything, how does the new meta shape up? Boss was among those phobie bans. And ultimately what has arisen, surprising no one, literally no one, is Innocuous and Repeller, because Attractor was also banned. Given this nerf, you no longer one-shot those things. Even with a Gonzo buff. When they're on level, which of course Monster of the Week is, everything's at level 1. I'm a little concerned about a influx of the Sentinels. And notably, this is why I was scrolling, they're not on here. Not only are they not on here, they're not mentioned down here, which we'll get to. Innocuous, Attractor, Repeller. Not even mentioned. And first of all, only Repeller is mentioned. Do they mention it? I missed it. Okay, they do mention Repeller. So here's the thing. And this is kind of a digression. I'm going to assume this was an oversight. Like, there's no world in which Attractor was not brought up in the balance suggestions from the community. I know that's true because I said Attractor needed to be changed. So there was at least one vote on there. And I am confident that every other person also put Attractor. Like literally every person that has seen Attractor said Attractor. Innocuous has been specifically cited as having a very close to 50% win rate in the past. I could definitely see that being true. Attractor should be in the list as well. In the we're not ready for a change list, or I'm assuming that. So, like I said, it sounds like it was just happened to be an oversight, and that's fine. However, I am coming back to Boss, unless you highlighted the bottom. Okay, yes. So it should be in the list of these are things that people talked about, but we're not ready to make a change yet. And we'll get to those later. So Attractor should be in that list. I don't think I put Innocuous on that list, but in light of this Boss change, I am a little concerned about, and I've talked about this repeatedly for the last couple of months, when people have really been beating the war drum for balance changes. I really think that Boss Gonzo is intended to preemptively conquer the Sentinel family. That is Innocuous, Attractor, Repeller. You can't do that now. I mean, you kind of can. It's going to depend, but they're going to have way more opportunity to try and preserve things that they didn't before. And the gameplay patterns that are encouraged by those 3 phobies, the Sentinels, is like massive NPE, negative player experience, at least in my experience, both using it and playing against it. So we'll see how this plays out. Again, I'm willing to put my faith and trust in the team. This is something that people have been clamoring for. Again, I feel like it might almost be too much of a nerf, but we'll see. We'll see. So moving from there, we have Charon. Damage increase from 325 to 350. Charon's biggest thing most people have complained about is the damage output. I'll be honest, I don't know if this is going to cause Charon to see much more play. The maps where Charon was showing up, like Scopaceum, maybe Diabolical, I don't know, maybe Locker Room Funk, I don't know. Wherever Charon was showing up before, I expect it to be more prevalent there. So I guess by definition, it's going to see more play. But I don't know if people are just going to randomly pop out. Like, I've seen it sometimes on Vile Vortis, but should you be putting Charon out on Vile Vortis? Like, I mean, you can, but that doesn't mean you should. So definitely helps out Charon. I'm fine with this. I think it's better that it gets buffed in this fashion, like a minor buff that people may look at and go, well, who cares? What's 25 damage? But the difference is that now it is that semi-relevant threat, as chat's pointing out. It's the same as Hevo and Jinsting are in that range. It's going to participate and contribute more than it did before in those niche scenarios where it was going to show up anyway, or had the potential to show up. Again, say on Scopoceum, you start turning off all the lava. Now Charon is able to take out something that it couldn't before. This is pretty solid. He hit a threshold now. He can kill stuff around snowball health. Yeah, exactly. Like, these are things that now Charon is a respectable threat. Is it going to make Charon show up on, I don't know, Moai? What's the other? Phobos. I couldn't think of the name of the map. Like, is it going to show up on those maps? Presumably not, unless somebody's memeing. But that's fine. Not every phobia is supposed to show up everywhere all the time. And Charon absolutely clearly has a defined role. Yeah, Diabolical was the one I said earlier that it has shown up on before, so it should still show up there. There's no reason. It's getting buffed, right? No reason for it to stop. So I like this one. Cupcake. This is another one that people have been complaining about. Added a one-turn ability lock. I don't think there's a lot to say about this that hasn't already been said, but I'm going to repeat it because, YouTube videos. Bottom line is that, yes, good. This means that Cupcake isn't going to pop out and just completely obliterate your team. Like, this is the joke or the meme where previously, as in like today, if I go play a Phobies game and somebody cupcakes me, you could probably hit someone on their half of the map, fairly close to their vault, depending on the map, with a cupcake from spawn, because it's just going to walk up, pop on one guy, probably a boss. The boss is then going to walk up, and then it's range, so it's going to hit 2 more tiles away and pop something. Just never, like, it slowed games down, because if you assumed or knew explicitly that your opponent had Cupcake, you had to play wildly differently. There's no two ways about it. Most of the time, I didn't, because I'm streaming and I don't care. It's like, all right, I lose a game, whatever. But I absolutely understand the frustration, and the correct play, if you were trying to play optimally, is to slow the game down. Don't play anything over-aggressive, because you're going to get blown out. And on some maps, it was just straight up unavoidable, namely small maps. The one-turn ability lock gives your opponent the ability to at least try to prevent it. You could make the argument that, oh, hey, just assume they have Cupcake, which is usually what I said to everybody. Like, look, there's no point in, like, keeping a list and, oh my God, this person has Cupcake. Let's blacklist them. Like, that's not a thing. That's just absurd. Just assume they have it. But I think the true answer is this. Correct it. I think this is a good change. We'll see how things go from there. As chat's pointing out, I think that Cupcake's still going to be very strong. Still going to be very good. So here's one that kind of came out of nowhere. Flesh Crawler. Decrease the ability cooldown from 2 to 1. Honest to God, I forgot Flesh Crawler even had this cooldown, because I can't remember. Well, I take it back. Last viewer games, we had a Flesh Crawler. Flash Crawler? I thought you were making a joke, Koro. Like, I thought this was, like, I don't know where it was going, but I assumed it was a joke. Why do you have 2 turn and Motherload had 1 turn? I don't know. That was the first flashy phobia I got. I think you're right. I was very excited to get that. But this is absolutely good. This 100% absolutely should happen. But I think Flesh Crawler could have a negative cooldown and it still wouldn't matter. Like, it could pop out, do its ability, and then you get to walk up and do its ability again, and it still wouldn't matter. Flesh Crawler's just bad. I'm hoping you and everyone, poor Flesh Crawler, forgotten by everyone. Yep. I hope that this brings Flesh Crawler back into prominence, because Flesh Crawler is a really cool phobie. Like, the art and the ability and all the stuff surrounding it is awesome. But for 7 keys, I could play Boggart instead. Like Boggart feels like way better. Like, way better. Gets outclassed by Motherlode. So that was something that I brought up months ago. I forgot when. I forgot why it came up. But there are a number of phobies that feel like they are in an unofficial family. So, for example, like Flesh Crawler, Motherlode, and I don't remember if we had a third, but like Motherlode does feel as though it is a almost strict upgrade on Flesh Crawler, especially before. But now the gap is closing. I hope Flesh Crawler can make an impact. I'm not going to hold my breath. Maybe the day of the Flesh Crawler is coming, but I'm not. I'm not a bet man, but I would not put money on that one. We'll see. Prove me wrong out there. Send me some viewer games once this goes live. I want to see Flesh Crawler go ham. All right. So here's another one that people have been talking about and been pleading for. Gonzo Bonzo. Decreased damage buff from 300 to 250. The ability was overpowered when used with some other phobies. This is a complicated unit to balance due to how it affects all other units, so your continued feedback is welcome. So first of all, I appreciate that there's way more. By way more, it's literally, this is 2 sentences. This is 2 sentences more than most of the updates got. I want at least this. Ideally, I won't want more personally, but I understand, like, all right, I can ask for a lot of things. It's, if wishes were fishes, right? But I would want at least this, like 2 sentences on everything. Like, why did Flesh Crawler all of a sudden get this buff? Don't get me wrong, it needed it. It needs more than this, but why did that all of a sudden get changed? And like, we all know why Cupcake got changed, but was it the fact that it was surprise I blew up your team on small maps? Or was it surprise I can do this on a large map? Or like, what was the driving force? I would love to know the details on these things, because I think, and the team has always played things close to the vest, that they don't provide a lot of information. I understand that, because realistically, we live in the year of our Lord 2024, and we all know what the internet is like. It's full of D-bags, right? And as much as I want the Phobies community to be different, there are a lot of people. I'm confident there's some D-bags, right? And we've all played games where the community managers, the devs, both, whoever, are very forthcoming, and they just get eviscerated by the community. Heavy emphasis on the air quotes. They just get eviscerated. Justly or unjustly, generally the latter. So I understand not wanting to be super forthcoming and just say, nope, this is it. This is what you get. We're not promising anything. We're not telling you anything. We're not teasing anything. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. But I think that it's important, and I would rather they take the risk and put the information out there, because I think it would help assuage the problems that the community has if the communication was there. It's like, look, these are the win rates. These are the things that are driving the, like, what are the KPIs? What is driving this change or that change? Why is this thing considered out of whack? What was the original thought process? Like, what is the role the team envisions for this? And admittedly, that's where you run into problems, because if the team says, well, Flesh Crawler was intended to do this, and then the community says, well, that obviously isn't doing it, you idiots. Well, how come you didn't? And that's when the spiral starts. I would like to believe that the community is mature enough that we can handle, you know, accepting the information. You can disagree. You can voice a concern, or a complaint, but keep it at a human level. Don't turn into internet lunatics. And I'd like to believe that that could be handled. We're not at that stage, but that's a digression. Podcast episode explaining why they changed what they changed. I would love to have the devs on a podcast. Trust me, I've been asking. I ask periodically every couple months. I ask for weeks on end for a while. But again, digression. Gonna add that to my vocabulary. Which word? But anyway, as far as Gonzo goes, yes, I agree. I think I would have liked to have seen it go to 200 rather than 250. So this is something that, again, isn't mentioned. Like, what is, I don't know offhand what the exact breakpoint is or which thing. Clearly, Boss Gonzo was part of the equation. But which phobies in particular? Obviously, it affects all of them. Clearly, it affects all of them. They say it right there. But which ones were the, like, I don't think we're worried about this thing pumping up Quagmire too often. I mean, it happens, but like, that is not the usual use case, nor is that the one that most people are concerned about. Stairmaster, yeah, probably not tearing it up in conjunction with this. So I would love to know which things in particular, why the 50 damage now is sufficient, or is this it seems like this is a potential multi-stage change. Like, they're willing to clearly make more changes, but it's going to take time for this one to play out. So, thumbs up. I like where this is going. We'll have to see how it goes. Similar to the boss thing before. Maybe the Sentinels are going to be a problem now. We'll see. Next up is Jackalopes. I know Karst is going to be thrilled. Karst really wanted a full-blown rework. Is the 100 to 125 buff gonna matter? I don't know. Probably not. Jackalopes now get a damage buff that's the same as their Resurrect HP. You know, that actually makes me happy. Like, those sort of things. One thing that bothered me about the boss change is now bosses, you're fired. And, like, the combination of things was before the same. So it was 300 and 200 versus 400 and 100. Total of 5. Now it's not going to match up. And, like, that, for balance reasons, great. That's fine. But in my head, in the back of my head, it bothers me. It bothers me. Like, it actually is going to keep me awake at night because now the numbers don't line up properly. And so the Jackalopes going the other way, and now their numbers do line up so that everything's, we'll call it symmetrical. That gives me a warm fuzzy in my brain. I know, it's weird things like that. Cars posted a sensible chuckle gif in Discord, and that's all he said about the Jackalopes change. Fair. Time to set everything's health to 437 level 1. Well, if everything is 437, that's okay, because they're all, like, it's a weird number. I don't understand where that one came from, but, like, they're all the same. But it will screw up the oh, not everything, just one thing. Oh, just one thing. Just one thing. No, that's just gonna, like, I'm gonna go ballistic. I won't be able to take it. The OCD is just gonna, like, eat me alive. But anyway, for the Jackalopes, sure. So here's the thing. I've talked about this before. There are a lot of schools of thought to game design. And my background is primarily in card games. We're talking the WoW TCG, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, that sort of thing. I could list the other, like, 50, but there's no point. So the idea is there are different schools of thought on how you want to design things, what the purpose for things are. And if you read, like, the Mark Rosewater article from, no joke, like, probably 20 years ago now, maybe longer. I know it's that because they were talking about packs being $2.50, which is just like, but anyway, we got a lot of digressions tonight. So he wrote an article explaining why there have to be bad cards or why there should be bad cards. So You could subscribe to that. You could not subscribe to that. There are other reasons outside of that that would impact Phobies or potentially may play into Phobies because it isn't a true CCG. However, the bottom line is I don't think this impacts the Jackalopes enough to make them all that useful. I think the better buff for Jackalopes would be a Jackalope Queen, a Jackalope Bishop, a Jackalope Knight, whatever. Like, I'm just going with chess stuff. Or like a Jackalope Princess. I don't care if you want to just do royalty. Point is that something like that, adding a new thing in, would both be better for the devs because they're creating a new thing and therefore people have to buy more stuff and blah, blah, blah. You know, all the financial business reasons. It also gives you another angle to have this legacy link to the original base set of Phobies and improve all the stuff. He sacrifices the Jackalope Rook. Or what is this, Gotham Chess? Jackalope Rook, and you can castle them, swap positions with the king. That would be wildly specific. That would actually be amazing. If there was a Jackalope Rook and it literally had a teleport ability that only worked with the king, like that would be amazing. The Jackalopes can merge into a 9-key Wendigo Phobia. There was a while, like a couple months in the first year of the game, where people were coming up with like Voltroning or Gestalting Phobies. I don't know if that's a good idea, but we'll see. But anyway, as far as Jackalopes go, I don't think this really impacts them. I don't like the idea of reworking Phobies, like completely changing their identity. There's a difference between a rework of like the Cupcake rework, but I don't want to see Cupcake now become like a turret. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make sense. I'd rather the Phobie be, which feels weird. This is a longer discussion, so we'll table that one for now. And we'll continue, because we got much more to go through. But anyway, Jackalopes, I like it, but I don't think it's going to matter. It's kind of like the Flesh Scroller change. Jaws, remove the ability lock. I have no idea why this happened. This is a newer Phobie. Like, this is not Jackalopes that were in the original set. This is a newer Phobie. I'm okay with it. I like seeing Jaws. Jaws is hilarious. Jaws is a high-risk, high-reward Phobie because obviously it's not 5 or 6 keys, however much you put in there. It's plus the Wiggy, plus the AWOL, plus the whatever, plus this random thing, plus that thing, and this thing, and that thing. Suddenly this whole smorgasbord turns into a bludgeon. But then all of a sudden, oops, you lost your Jaws, and then suddenly your opponent got like a 5 for 12, 15, 20 key trade, whatever. Chat saying the Jaws lock removal helps a lot. I hope so. I think this is cool. This is a buff that doesn't really, like, this doesn't break the Phobie. You know what I mean? Because it still does all the things that it did. It gives you another half an action, essentially, right? Because previously you would have had to wait. So like you'd position twice, but you could now do it on the first turn. Like, I really like this. I think this is cool. Jaws just took too long to get booted up. Not as fun. It still uses an action needed Phobia. Yeah, I mean, that's why I think this is a buff that is completely reasonable, that for me at least came out of left field. But it's a good surprise. Like, this I think is a good surprise. I got 15 keys and traded nothing for it. So, yeah, Jaws, thumbs up. I played Jaws off in loose tempo because the locker can't even sacrifice disease phobies that are dying because of the lock. Yeah, I mean, I think this is good. I think this is good. This next one I don't know about. I'm a little concerned. So Leela, increased the movement range from 1 to 2 and decreased health from 1800 to 1500 as it was underperforming compared to other trap units. I said this when it was previewed that I hoped it was bad. And then when it turned out to be bad, obviously, I'll be honest, I was very happy. I don't want to see Leela be good. I think Leela is going to be miserable to play against. I agree that the one movement was what killed it. It feels as though it has to be used or had to be used on small maps, and then in order to bank for it and get it set up. It just never really got going. And again, the disease was not enormous. And let me look this up real quick. Toximoxy. It's a 300 disease at level 1. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'll be honest, I don't want to see this thing be good. It's a 2-ranger. 2-range trap throw. So, I don't know. We'll see. Disease still won't be OP, but this will make it a playable phobia, 1k more HP than Poison Ivy. Does it really have that much? What? Poison Ivy only has 800 health? That can't be true. Poison Ivy has 1350. What are you talking about, Kuro? I think it'll be like Poison Ivy now, a bit higher risk, higher reward. So the thing is that similar to Poison Ivy, it is going to get that. So it's going to hit the initial trap damage, then it's going to hit the disease damage, right? Just like Poison Ivy does. It hits the trap, and then it hits the poison damage. So it does get kind of an explosive hit for 600 immediately, but that you do need time to accrue the value from the trap. There are multiple. It's not just the disease that I take issue with, although the disease is part of it. Inherently, because you want the game to slow down with Leela, I am personally opposed to slowing the game down. So that's why I don't want Trappers and Leela to be good. I don't think it is bad or unhealthy. Like, here's the difference. I don't like that gameplay loop, that gameplay pattern. And I know there's other people who also feel the same way. However, there are people who do, and there's no reason that I should be catered to over them from a game design perspective. Unless the feeling is that the games tend to go long anyway. Now, I personally think that they kind of do. I think Phobies and Phobies players tend to play overly defensively and drag games out that they don't need to. I think Leela is going to exacerbate that issue to like the nth degree. However, we'll see. We'll see. I know I have a Leela. I haven't used it in forever. I'm absolutely going to be using it after this update. I'm definitely going to try it. I'll have to dig up what my original plans were as I was mapping stuff out. I'm looking forward to trying it. I'm hoping that it's still not going to be good. Only because I just don't want to see more Trappers. I don't want the games to devolve into, you've activated my trap card. I really don't want that. But we'll see. Next up is Microscopic. Notably, Gesundheit did not get a buff, but Microscopic did. 850 to 900 health. Sure. I don't know if Germs needed a buff, but all right. The only time I really see Microscopic or Gesundheit, banish your opponent to the Shadow Realm with trap cards. You know, honest to God, chat, I think I've seen 10 minutes of a Yu-Gi-Oh show once, and that was only because the girl I was dating at the time, like her brother, watched the show. So like I'd be over there, and then her brother was watching it. I don't actually know anything about Yu-Gi-Oh other than the memes. Mike, I don't mind too much. It's not much of a buff. I guess it'll help him survive in it. Yeah, like, this is clearly, it's splash damage or, come on, Yu-Gi-Oh's. No, like, legitimately, I never saw it. So I don't really have any opinion on it. So I don't know. I'm not saying it was bad. I mean, it probably was, but I legitimately don't know. As far as Mike goes, sure. Like, all right. Whatever. You got yourself a change. I don't know. Minotaur, increased damage from 400 425. Mike is so back MVP now. The only time I see Mike and Gesundheit is, oh, your opponent, they delved too deep. And it's a surprise germ, and you just blow them up kind of thing, usually. And even then, it doesn't usually happen. I love using Minotaur when I'm able, and seeing him getting a buff makes me happy. I think Minotaur has always been an underrated phobie, but the scenarios are just, it's just rarer, right? There aren't as many times when you can use Minotaur, so it's tough. It's tough. I do like that Minotaur's getting a buff here. I hope that it sees more play. We have seen it show up in Monster of the Week. We've seen it show up in Fright Night, because at level 1, people are, I think they're just more willing to try some of these things, and they are a little surprised, because on ladder, I think a lot of people neglect Minotaur and just don't level it up. And as a result, you end up with these phobies that, okay, well, if they were going to underperform anyway, you know, like they had a niche role, then they're under-leveled, so now they're never getting onto the board. But at level 1s, when you force it all to level 1, people are willing to try and be like, all right, well, I need to get out of this scenario. I'm going to try this, and then, hey, it works. So I think this is worth something. Yeah, Pot of Greed. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Minotaur getting a buff. I think this is good. Misanthrope, increase the damage. We're going to see more, Chad, are we going to see more Paladin Misanthrope on, was it Home Sweet Home or Billy's Room? I think it was Home Sweet Home. Misanthrope now has Gin Sting damage too. It can be an option now with its damage and HP. Misanthrope is a very small buff, but it does help him kill some stuff. I mean, 350... The 330 was a weird damage, right? Jammy Fish is the Pot of Greed of Phobies. What? Yeah, DT, you came back at the wrong time. You came back in time for the Misanthrope buff. Hi, baby. It's right here. We have to pet her. It was Billy's room. That's what I thought. I mean, I'm down for it. I'm down for it. Misanthrope getting this. Again, this is another one similar to the last couple where I don't know what breakpoint is now being hit that it wasn't before. But a slight buff to try and push this thing into more prominence? Sure, why not? The thing I will call out about this, as well as Minotaurs, both, obviously Misanthrope is very tanky, it's a mech. Minotaur is pretty tanky also. With them getting damage increases, I like the idea of them being able to dive turrets or dive defensive positions, and then being just tanky enough and now threatening enough to say, hey, I'm not wasting my time putting them on the board. But they are tanky enough that they can get in and shield the rest of your team, because either they're blocking line of sight, or now that they're representing more damage, if they're standing on your opponent's toes, your opponent has to respect it. Admittedly, it's a 20 damage increase and a 25 damage increase respectively, but maybe, why not? Next up is Ogre. Increase rage damage from 300 to 350 and increase heart health condition from less than 3,000 to less than 4,000. So there was a lot of talk in Discord about what it would take to change it to percentages so that it activates more quickly on large maps. I don't know. I don't know that this is really going to make, again, great. Ogre gets a buff. I don't know that it's going to make a difference, which overall, I am in favor of changes, whether it's a buff or a nerf, where, hey, we're going to make this change. We're going to buff Ogre's damage and change the hard health condition. And you know what? I don't think it's going to make a material difference in his usage. So make the change. Like, if it's not going to change any, like, at worst, it makes it slightly better. Or not at worst. At best, it's probably going to make it slightly better. At worst, it does nothing. And if it does nothing, then all right, then next time around, we'll buff it even more. So I like these sort of changes where, okay, change them. Why not? Give people more reasons to use their toys. I think it will help Ogre. Well, it's obviously not going to hurt it. I'm not saying this is going to, well, this is the change that makes Ogre completely useless. No, like that. I don't know how much it's going to make a difference. We've seen so little Ogre. Now, the rage activation point, I think, is more important. Now, Hoovy is better with Ogre. Sure. Sure. The rage activate actually with Hoovy, I kind of wanted to see that where somebody you acted. Is the rage activation permanent? It's got to be a constantly checking passive, right? So if you heal above it with Hoovy, it depowers Ogre, probably. I kind of want to see that in a game. Rage is permanent. Once you're raging, it sticks. Oh, okay. So Hoovy never mattered. Okay. I think it's permanent. Someone tested it. Yeah, it sounds like it's permanent. So that's actually kind of cute. It literally just occurred to me. So, I don't know. I hope that Ogre, again, I want to see these other phobies. So I hope that this makes a difference. I'm not super optimistic about it just because at that key cost, you don't just need a big dummy, usually. Like, even though Evo 2.0 is way, way less damage, especially when he's enraged, the boop is probably, and lob also, is probably more impactful than just pew pew, right? We'll have to see. I swear to God, for a second, I thought this said increased range from 350 to 400, and I thought I was looking at StarCraft and Warcraft patch notes for a second. But yeah, this is a big buff. This goes from Jin Sting level damage to like Klepto damage output. Yeah, I thought wait, what's a 350 range in Phobia? What does that mean? Oopsie damage is going to bother me now because its debuff won't match. See, Koro? See? I am not alone. I am not alone. There are other people who care that things don't line up. It bothers me. Every time that I see, because there are a handful of phobies that already have this, but they're few and far between. And every time I see it, I may not articulate it, but in my head, there's a tiny flame burning that gets a little bit bigger every time. They're not the same. Well, they're not now, or they're not going to be due to this change. I mean, so Oopsie Baby right now is 350 damage and 350 damage debuff. It's now going to be 400 damage for its attack and 350 damage for the debuff. It's just not. They're not the same. My OCD is just going to. Anyway, this is pretty cool. Like, yeah, I felt like Oopsie Baby was in a pretty good spot. So this is like, I think Oopsie Baby is a big winner. Big winner out of this patch. I just looked at the next one. I almost peed a little, chat. We'll finish up with Oopsie. Oopsie, my OCD is going to act up. Yeah. I think Oopsie was in a pretty good spot. So Russell! And we're getting there. Hold up, chat. I thought Oopsie was in a really good spot. So now, I mean, Oopsie's going to be in a better spot. So expect to see a lot of Oopsie babies. Which, I will point out, Oopsie Baby is actually a pretty good counter to Evo 3.0. Because when you power down Evo, and again, it's a 3 ranger, so it's really hard to get away from, even though it's a 1 mover. And now it's a bigger threat. I don't know. I'm seeing. Weren't you ranting about Russell a couple streams ago? I talk about Russell on every stream, just about. But yeah, Russell, I don't know about this one. So I like using Russell. There was a while, like a few months, where I was pushing using Russell. And the thing is that I am of the opinion that this was like the worst possible buff to give Russell. Now, don't get me wrong. The other buffs were irrelevant. But the problem with this is that it is just so dangerous. I'm sorry, I've been waiting to do that all patch notes. It's allowed. It's allowed. So I'm concerned about this one. It may be fine. It may be fine. But the way I've always put it is this. This is, no pun intended, a hyper-toxic ability. It is very easy for this thing to go, Russell! It's very easy for it to go, Russell! it's very easy for this to just completely muck up not just a game, but all the games where there is no escape. Think about all of the complaints about Akira. Except now you just poison all their guys and kill them. Like, it's... I anticipate using Russell a lot. I don't know that it needed this. I was very fine with the world where Russell was unplayable, quote unquote. It may be fine. This may be a change similar to what we were talking about with like Minotaur and Microscopic and even Ogre and Misanthrope and stuff where, hey, this got a buff, but it doesn't materially change or impact the Phobies' position in the greater scheme, the hierarchy of Phobie power. This is a global ability. I promise you an enormous amount of people are going to get clobbered by this. They are going to get bodied. They are going to get cooked because they maxed out. It's going to be a non-healing spa map, and they are just going to die. They're going to lose like 17 keys due to Russell because they won't be able to push, or their opponent has like a defensive position. And people are going to get cooked, and that is a stinky stew. It's a gross stew. Get ready for some Russell, chat. Like, real talk. Get ready for some Russell. I will absolutely be using Russell. Apparently, it's gonna be. Holy shit! There is a Rusty buff. Sorry, I didn't even see that before. Like, I only skimmed the notes. So yeah, Russell. There's gonna be some Russell gaming coming. So save up your channel points now, chat. Rusty, decrease key cost from 2 to 1. I don't know how much this impacts it, but I absolutely... I don't know what my Rusty... What level is my Rusty offhand? My Rusty is level 6. And I level it up. I cannot level it up. I will be... Yeah, the cost change is also new. Like, that happening is change. Rusty's going to be a game changer. So, we're going over them now for Tute, but I'm going to post this on YouTube later. So, I think the thing is that now Rusty is a utility Phobie. Like, at 2 keys, it was just too pricey to incinerate, right? But now, at 1 key, it's like, all right, I'll cap a point, then lock down one of their guys and murder that guy. I think that's a completely reasonable play. Like that is complete. Like, the threat of Rusty just flying around the map and just going, you know what? You put one toe out of line, I'm taking it off. I think this works. I think this is a great change. And Rusty, like, look, Rusty was its own goddamn tier. Rusty was its own goddamn tier. It was so bad. Now it's completely playable. I think this is reasonable. I think this is seriously reasonable. I like this. I like this. Rusty with paddles about to go crazy. All right, don't calm down. You might be cooking too much there, Shinra. Like, you're burning what you're cooking. Let's not get crazy. All right. Smiley, increased disease from 375 to 425. This is something that we absolutely would have. Somebody's got to do the math on this and be like, does this mean that Beauty or Boss dies 1 turn sooner than it did previously or something? That's what I'm picturing here. Like, that's the thing that's going to matter. Obviously, in any given scenario, the extra damage. Did Smiley need it, though? So people have been clamoring for a Smiley buff, and there have been a lot of crazy... I would argue, yes, it did need a buff, but we'll get to that in a second. There were a lot of crazy suggestions for reworks for Smiley, of like having it do completely different things. And again, I said this earlier, I don't want to, I don't like the idea of completely changing a Phobie's role. He was considered one of the best diseasers, yeah, but they were all bad. So, like, being the top of the crap heap is still bad. So, well, Smiley was not bad. He was decent. which is head and shoulders above the rest. It means that Biscotti and Fowl had better win rates and Smiley, since those are the only disease phobies that didn't get buffed. Yeah. I mean, that's a reasonable assertion. There are other factors that could play in to why it was changed, but the other ones weren't. But I think win rate is probably a reasonable assumption here. The thing is that I anticipate a lot of people, A, don't know how to use Smiley properly, and B, even if they were using it properly, it was still difficult to execute. So, for example, if you stapled Smiley onto your team to try and counter Boss, or Beauty, or any other Blom, or whatever, it's some AoE, it's entirely possible that you ended up losing anyway because of the power level of those things, and therefore making Smiley's win rate worse, or you ended up losing anyway because it was a difficult strategy to execute and you botched it. Lots of things could happen. But the thing is that it still comes down to me, does this change a breakpoint? Because a lot of the time it would... I've had plenty of games where I popped out Smiley against a boss, got hit with You're Fired, I diseased the boss, and then the boss never dies to the goddamn disease. Now, I can't tell you exactly how many turns it sat with disease, but I can tell you with certainty that it should have reasonably died sooner. Now, boss got an HP nerf. This gets a damage buff. So we're getting two converging factors coming in, changing the calculus for a variety of different phobies. So I think this could be pretty impactful, but I would have to sit and chart which phobies are impacted. Again, does this shave a turn, 2 turns, 3 turns? It's a 50 damage change. You know, like that can add up pretty quickly, especially on certain dimensionals. So maybe. This is another change, as chat's pointing out, if it's not going to if we think it's not going to change anything, then I think this is a good change. Because if there's no impact to the game, then clearly it was in a bad spot before. You're going to have to catch the video later then, Karma. Though he did about 563 disease damage to dimensionals before, now he's doing about 638. Okay. Like, I don't know what that means in terms of, like, we'd have to find whatever phobie and say, okay, well, now this dies in 3 turns versus 4 or whatever. Even on some monsters, it kills them a turn sooner. You'd have to do the math, but I'm too late. I mean, that's what it boils down to, Kuro. I'll have to look at it and see. I don't know offhand what those numbers are. Sparky, increased damage from 375 to 400. Now, I'm assuming this is, and I'm not sure. Okay, no, this now, okay, this is another one. Here we go. It was 375 damage with 400 electrical, and now it's 400 damage with 400 electrical. It's all coming together, chat. It's all coming together. So now it can one-shot a tractor. No, it can't. A tractor's 900 health, isn't it? How much health is a tractor? I'm going to have to look this up. A tractor's 900 base health. Innocuous is 800. So I always disagreed with Karst about trying to make those 3 the same health. They do not serve the same purpose. Like, they don't function in the same role. Obviously, one's damage, one's boop, one's pull. There's an argument that Sparky should not one-shot a tractor. However, it is closer to one-shotting a tractor, which means that maybe now Splash does get it if it didn't before. Maybe it did before and this doesn't change anything. But it does one-shot Innocuous, which is relevant. It is relevant. Again, this is good. It definitely needed some help. Sparky's... There's no way Sparky was in a good spot. All right. Next up, we got the Speedola's blue and red increased tag team damage buff from plus 100 to plus 200. So these guys are going to be slapping the crap out of people. So now the red Speedola's with the buff, the tag team buff, is going to be doing 600. And the blue one's going to be doing 650. That's a lot of damage. Like, that's a lot of damage. I don't Heart Rush Speedola getting more appealing. Like, honestly, on Diabolical, Speedolas might be 100% of the time, right? It might be 100% of the time. I don't know. I'm very curious about this. It's still 11 keys, so to a degree, it's an 11 key phobia, air quotes, because you need both. I don't know if it's too much Ozari, because it sounds like a lot, but they are melee, but they are also super tanky. But again, at a certain point, it's 11 keys. Like, if you're going to spend 11 keys, you better get 11 keys worth of value, right? Like, this goes back to when we were talking about the boss nerf. Whether it's an 8 key, a 9 key, an 11 key, essentially, whatever. If you're spending that many keys and you get bad sushi, you're going to be pissed, right? I don't think they needed it. They needed something because they're not very good. Well, it's not that they're not very good. They are absolutely not used. And I think it comes down to them being melee. I could see a world in which they're now oppressive, but I need that proven to me. I need that proven to me at this stage. I don't know if I can buy these things being problematic right now. We'll see. But if you're on Diabolical, you better be ready. You better be ready with your electrical phobies because these guys are coming. They are coming. All right, next up we get another movement increase. This is one that I don't think you want this. I'll be honest, I don't think I like any of the movement increases at all. I don't think I like any of the movement increases at all. This might be the most egregious one, though, because it's the least costly one. Now, for those of you that don't recall, and again, hopefully I'll remember to edit this in, Tick is a 3 cost. It's melee, admittedly, and we've been talking about how melee is not good. We were just talking about it with the Speedolas. But it has an AoE disease. Yeah, 1400 or 1300 HP. Here's the thing. If you connect on 2 phobies with this, you've probably gotten value, right? This is going to bully the crap out of people. I'm a little concerned about this one. Now, admittedly, if it takes time, so like you go in, you hit them with Tick, you hit their stabby and something else, and it takes like 3 turns for their stuff to die. They're still doing things with those 3 turns, and you probably are +1 key. So it's not that big of a deal until you consider, well, what happens when this disease is, like your random high cost thing? I don't know. It seems like a very low key cost investment to ensure a kill on something big. I'm looking forward to wreaking some havoc with Gonzo Tick. It's entirely possible we're Cupcake for that matter, and just, well, now I run down your team and give him Lyme's disease. Your ability is pretty strong for the cost. Yeah, I mean, this is the same way that people use creep to like just dive stuff and spit on it, and they're like, all right, the creep dies, who cares? This is the same sort of thing. I don't know. This is I I think, to me, Tick was in Leela tier where I did not want it to be good, and I was fine with it being bad. Obviously, the devs were not, so they want to buff it. We'll see. There's now 2 disease phobies that are going to be showing up with much more regularity. We'll have to see. Imagine diseasing an entire team with 3 keys. Akira into Tick. It's going to happen. Disease is a toxic mechanic. Got him. 3 counting spot. True. Damage increase on Tiny Tim. Okay. The only time I ever see Tiny Tim attack, the game is over. And for the Tiny Tim player, and not in their favor. Kieran, I told you, that's why I said it. It's going to happen, and you're all going to be very unhappy about it. I don't understand the Tiny Tim buff. It wasn't performing well. You can't buff its health, right? It already has an enormous health pool. The problem is that the purpose that Tiny Tim serves is just not that relevant. Someone mentioned Tiny Tim and Furnace Face combo. Sure. Who asked for the Tick buff? Lots of people, to be honest. Seriously. I don't mind the damage increase, though. Sometimes he needs to take out an attack with a smaller unit. I mean, it's fine. I'm not going to complain about it, but I don't know. This one's relevant to my interest, though. Notably, because as I've said on many occasions, Bachelor is 500 health. Bachelor now tanks the Unicorn Trap. Is this enough to push Unicorn out? I'm not sure. But it is relevant. It's not good. A 75 damage nerf, and Rusty is 500 HP. Ooh, Rusty's 500 HP. Let's go. Preying on Unicorn's downfall. I mean, a lot of people have been hating Unicorn for a while, and with good reason. 425 damage is still a lot, though. There are obviously going to be games where you survive the trap and their attack volleys that you wouldn't have survived before. But the thing is, as chat's pointing out, Unicorn's still going to be fine. It's still going to be fine. Any one key that stands on it, still going to die. Just now Bachelor and Rusty tank it. It's fine. Unicorn does more damage than Ginsting. It's true. It's more likely than you think. The last change, before we get into the other stuff, and we'll take a break here, is Zappy. Zappy got a health buff. Cool. Seems good to me. I like Zappy. Zappy's a fun phobie. I tend to only use it personally on Locker Room Funk. I think it's fine. So, chat, I'm going to take a quick break. I'll put on a game for observation purposes. We'll come back, finish up the patch notes, and then figure out what we're doing. All right, chat, we're back. So, I was wondering why people were talking about Creepy Devil. Apparently there's a Sasquatch? Or is the Creepy Devil the thing that's invisible? Whatever, we got more patch notes to talk about, chat. We got more patch notes. All right, so after the brief break, let's close out the patch notes here, and then we'll go from there. So we've been monitoring all the Phobies KPIs and win rates, including the monsters players have mentioned, and we'll continue to monitor them over future releases. The win rates for these other Phobies over thousands of games show that they are not unbalanced. This includes the Phobies below that were mentioned by you all in your feedback. This is me inserting stuff. This is part of what kind of confused me about the initial statement that we got clarification on already, but it was just worded in a way that made it unclear to me as to which phobies were showing as out of alignment versus the ones that were showing as fine, but the community was whining about. My words, not theirs. We do not want to adjust these phobies at this time as it will create new balance issues. So I can definitely respect that. So this list is big. We'll run through it real quick. Alligator, Baby Snakey, Barzilla, Blastomatic, Bone Mangles, Boo Fairy, Chuck, Clobster, Creep, Dr. Dermic, Doom Doom, Dozer, Fetch, Finnegan, Fire Ant, Foul, Ginsting, Heartbreaker, Hevo 2.0, Hevo 3.0, Hematic Ginsting, Hydra, Klepto, Leshy, Metabot, Mr. Tramples, Noxious, Paddles, Piscetti, Rambolina, Ray Chargels, Repellers, Slammerhead, Smother Mother, Snowball, Squiggle, Stabby, Temptress, Thunderrock, Zamboni, and Attractor. I know it's not on there, but we know. We know. For Bad Sushi, we are already aware of its issues, but we'll be making modifications. But making modifications will require more time and possibly a rework. We're looking to rework this unit in our next major release. So I'm curious what it is, what the rework's going to be. Starting with the bottom, talking about Bad Sushi. I mentioned earlier, I'd rather they leave Bad Sushi as garbage, to be honest. I think there is value to be had in having these sort of phobies. However, I think that to the point of the phobies economy, which has always been my number one complaint, like miles above balance, I think that in the interest of correcting the economic issues, reworking Bad Sushi to be viable as a phobie, thereby, quote unquote, recouping some money. If you put, as the player, putting money in and you got Bad Sushi, it's like crap. I incinerated whatever money. I think that is valuable. I think that is a worthwhile endeavor. Quite a few I'm surprised to see on that list. Now remember, this list, all of these things came from, I'm sure the devs were working on this, but one of the big initiating factors was a community feedback form. This was put out by the team. The team collected data from the community as a whole, and excuse me, the community just put in whatever phobies and what they thought needed to be changed and why they didn't like it. And then this is what people ended up with. Why people chose some of these things, I can't even begin to tell you. We don't know whether people wanted these things buffed, nerfed, reworked, all of the above, whatever. But like I said at the top, combined with the phobies that were changed, we're talking over 40% of the phobies in the game. And I think at the time of, well, the numbers were different. I think you can tell what they want changed. No, trust me, you can't. Because people constantly, I promise you, every single phobia on this list had at least one person say that it needed to be nerfed. I will say that with 100% certainty. I would have to, honest to God, somebody would have, from the dev team, would have to prove it to me that nobody said that they wanted Alligator nerfed. Or Metabot. I'm not even joking. Because I think you have to remember that anybody who's in this stream right now, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you're included in this too. You are already in like the 0.1% of the player base. Most people will never watch a video. They will never watch a stream. They'll never go to Discord. They just don't. I've seen people asking for buffs to Blue Leon unironically. Exactly. There were people, I distinctly recall people saying that Akira was bad. That Akira was unplayable. And you're out of your mind if you want to play Akira. Something tells me those people are real quiet right now. I don't know. I'm not an expert. But the thing is that balance always comes down to, well, what's the scope? What are we talking about? And what are we trying to balance around? It gets very complicated. I thought Bad Sushi could have been fine if you just made his ability activate once it ends its turn next to an enemy, but still has cooldown. So kind of like a poison smiley, basically. I think the devs specifically wanted something different about it. Like, they wanted it to be different. Honestly, and I said this at the beginning. Every single phobie should pretty much always be in consideration for changes, especially when a phobie, any phobie, not even the one we happen to be focusing on, is slated to be changed. Because the relationships between the phobies, I am of the opinion, until somebody from the dev team tells me otherwise, that the game is balanced and designed around you having pretty much, if not the whole collection, and that the players are roughly even levels. Because there are too many phobies that are quite clearly intended, well, this stops this. And then if they do that to stop, like if A beats B, you use C to try and beat A and then you have this arms race. There are other phobies that are clearly designed around certain maps, like Charon, like we were talking about before, or the Speedolas on Diabolical. Clearly, certain phobies are favored on certain maps. And if you don't have access to those things, but your opponent does, you're clearly going to be at an advantage or disadvantage, depending on the scenario. And that's why the relationships for balance become so complex. And the goals, which is something to call it back to one of the things that I would complain about this, and I did bring it up multiple times, we have a whole 2 sentences for Gonzo. We have a whole 1 sentence for Leela. And there's very few phobies that actually have information as to why something changed. Yes, we all of us, obviously not everyone, but we all said that Gonzo needed to be nerfed. We all said that Akira needed to be nerfed. We all said that this needed to be buffed or blah, blah, blah. But why did the devs agree? Is it strictly win rate driven? Presumably not. Almost assuredly not, because they mentioned win rates and KPIs. But what are those KPIs? How much does this phobie's role is X, but it's not really doing that. It's doing this other thing, but it's winning and the community likes it or hates it or what? Like, how much does that, because that's more of a qualitative thing than a quantitative thing for the most part. How much does that play in? I would love to know more about the dev's thought process, because that helps us evaluate what the actual health of the game is, not from, well, we have X number of players or we have a Y amount of wait time at Sum of All Fears 2 or whatever. But how is the game supposed to function in the dev's eyes? Now, the risk there is that someone may say, well, I don't like that game. And the reality is that's okay. It's okay to like or not like a thing. And that's fine. We're all gonna, like, we're all adults. We can disagree on those sort of things. Like, there's a difference between this phobie is broken and it is clearly problematic for the game in whatever way, versus I don't like that type of gameplay, slower gameplay, faster gameplay, more involved gameplay, more counterplay focused, whatever, or I like this thing. Those are 2 different discussions, and those are kind of tangential, but do impact balance. Because what a lot of people identify as a balance issue may just be you just don't like it. And that is fine, but it's important to distinguish between the two, because one could be solved with changing numbers. The other is a you problem, is what it comes down to. Well, the thing for Tute is, like, what is the win rate? Like, at what level? At what, like, is it, like you said, is it heebie-jeebies? Is it Sum of All Fears 3? How many games is it? What is the scenario? I mean, we've seen Karst and other players, high-level players, take quote-unquote terrible phobies and just dominate people. My counter-argument would be that's the latter. and the latter is kind of meaningless. So it's tough. The key performance indicator of Cupcake and Boss was only use and no risk. I mean, kind of, yeah. To be fair, how many higher-ups do you see using Boo Fairy, where they get that data from, Some of All Fears? I don't know, because the thing is I watch a lot of games, but I can't watch all of them. I would love for there to be like a public API for us, or if the devs would just share it. I've played other games, and I'm even semi-involved with other games, where they put out monthly reports and give all that data to the players. That is not the way SGI operates, which is fine. It's two different methodologies and two different ways of handling things. But overall, I would like to see more information, more of this from the devs. Like, this was great. I think this gives us a lot of insight. But I think that it's important for us to understand, what are these KPIs? What are we trying to accomplish with some of these phobies? Because the people who suggested that these phobies need to be changed are going to be upset. Odds are they've probably grown as players since, like, it was a while ago that this thing went out. But I imagine that there are going to be people that are going to be upset. Well, why didn't Dozer get buffed, nerfed, whatever? I don't even know what the hell they wanted with that. Or Noxious, or what? Well, I mean, I guess I kind of get Noxious, but some of these just make no sense to me. But whoever suggested it had something in mind, so give them a bone. Like, tell me why. Plus, I would personally find it very interesting. That would be my biggest complaint about the patch notes, is just overall there isn't a whole lot of information as to why, especially things like the movement changes. I get why that's incredibly powerful. We talked about it a lot, but why are we doing this? I'm not sure. We can infer a lot of things. We can try and surmise what's going on, but I would rather them just tell us so that there's no ambiguity. That's just me. So those are all the balance changes. I'm sure we're going to be talking about them all the way up until their actual release. Now, Fright Night, well, by the time this video goes live, Fright Night's already going to be underway. But the next Fright Night Future Monster of the Week tournaments, which, by the way, you can find information about those in the Random Thoughts Discord, link for that in the description. Those are no longer going to have ban lists for the foreseeable future, as we try and feel out how these changes actually impact the game that we know and love. But let me know down in the comments, what are you excited about? Which changes do you feel were the most impactful? Did they miss any? What ones would you want to see going forward? We got a lot to talk about. We got a lot of things to examine, but that's going to do it for now. So as always, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time for more Random Thoughts.